Okay, if you're wanting to learn how to 3D print your own, design your own lures and 3D print your own lures, that's what we're here for. Today's video is going to be about slicer settings that I like to use to set myself up for the most success when it comes to a lure. In our previous videos, we've been designing our own lure from scratch in Blender. There's a link to that playlist in the description below if you have not been following along. Where we last left off in that video, I realized that I forgot to show you how to add the lure eyes if you want some eyes in it. The eyes that I have on hand are 8.5 millimeter, so we're gonna create those real quick. We're gonna make a cylinder, and I'm making about 5/100ths of an inch deep. They're 8.5 millimeter eyes, and I know that that's 0.334 inches. So there's my eye. Oh no, don't do that. I'm gonna rotate it on the X 90 degrees. There we go. But I'm gonna increase this a little bit for the sake of tolerances. Make this 1/100th of an inch bigger in both directions. The diameter basically 1/100th of an inch bigger. And let's figure out where we want to put that eye. You could put it wherever you feel is best. Right there probably looks good, huh? Yeah, I like so the eyes I have are like 3D. They've got like they're a little bit of a bubble to them. I like them to stick out a little bit. So let's move this out along the Y. Turn our X-ray mode off. And you want to get it to where, oh, you know what we need to do? A couple of things first. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier here. Clean that up a little bit. That ain't gonna work. Okay, so in order to get those hard surfaces back, we want to add a loop cut here and a loop cut over this way. So we're gonna add two, leave them where they are. You want it to pretty much be right on top of that other one. Out here is not as important, but we are going to want to get it over there. Okay, and then the other thing that I want to do is select this, actually put it back in X-ray mode. Oh, biscuits. Alright. Rookie mistake. I didn't have X-ray mode on whenever I moved that, so we'll slide it back over there again. Okay, so select this surface, and I want to scale it up. I kind of want to make this right here about 45 degrees, give or take. Again, it's just easier for our printers to print that. Turn our X-ray mode back off. Let's slide this in. Get it right where it's starting to hit there. Let's go to the top view and let's rotate it so that it's running parallel with the face or the head. Just an eyeball. Huh. No pun intended. Now we're going to rotate this one along the Y. Let's see what is that? No, that is. There we go. Along the local X. And we will move it in a little more. Now what I'm looking for is I want this edge to just be inside of the head everywhere. I don't want it sticking out anywhere. That looks about right. Let's look at it again from the top view. We can do this. Get a little more parallel. Is that what we want? Yeah, I think so. Okay, that looks good enough. And I'm going to duplicate it. Shift D, we move it back along the Y. Right click it and go to mirror. Mirror along the Y. So now same thing over here. To get it set in the same area of the face, since we have the lure body centered along the 3D cursor here, take this Y dimension, copy it, and we're just going to paste it over here and make sure that we make it a negative value. Like that. Okay, and let's give our lure 2 new Boolean modifiers. One for each eye. Again, I always minimize these. Once it's done and I want to keep it, I don't apply it, I don't save it, I just minimize it and keep them all open here. Because we may find out later that we made a mistake and we need to change something. Let's hide them and see what it looks like. Oh yeah, beautiful. Perfect. Okay. So, we can print that. And a neat thing with Cura, maybe all slicers do this, I don't know. This was our lure without the eyes. When I go to export this file, Cura is going to tell me, hey, guess what? Your file's been modified. Would you like to load the newest save? And if I had this oriented, turned, something in a different place, it would put it back where I had it. And it would keep all your support blockers and all that stuff on there. Okay, cool. So we're in Cura, or your slicer software of choice. An important thing to note is that you need to determine where the front of your bed is. This is the front of my bed, and I got a bed slinger, so the bed moves in and out this way. You don't want your lure oriented like this, because it's, as the bed moves in and out quickly, it's going to be rocking back and forth. You want to pivot that 90 degrees so that it's like this. Not that one. Undo. Silly goose. Okay, 90 degrees right there. And before we go much further, you need to make sure that you have your specific filament set up in your slicer. I assume that they can all do this. You see, whenever I slice this, it is going to tell me, obviously, the time, but it's going to tell me the weight. And it's pretty close. It's within a couple of tenths of a gram whenever I've tested it on the gram scale. Now, this doesn't tell me tenths of a gram. It only tells me whole numbers. So I get 13 grams or 14 grams. And whenever I weigh it, I get somewhere in there. I usually try to fiddle with the infill percentage or something like that until I get it roughly around the next number, or the, so it'll be like right around 12 or 13, so that I know that I'm as close to 13.0 as possible, or 14.0 as possible. But you need to have your filament set up. And in Cura, you go to Preferences, Configure Cura. you're going to go down to materials. If you haven't been here before, you're going to want to hit create new. I have mine set up here under Overture PETG, which I'm using PETG. Fill in all your blanks, make it the color you want to make it. You're going to want your density. So if your the box that your PLA comes in, or the documentation that comes with it, doesn't list your density, you should be able to find it on well, you'll see here, Overture PETG density, or whatever you have. Let's see if Sunlu PETG density. This says 1.07. I don't know how accurate that is. Let's see if we can find it on the manufacturer's website. Filaments, general filaments, PETG. That's where it was already. Let's just click on this guy. Usually it'll be in a document here, like a technical document. I don't know that it'll be listed in the MSDS or in the SDS, but we can look at this one and see if it does. Should be listed as grams per cubic centimeter. I'm not seeing it here. Oh, here we go. Density 1.23 grams per cubic centimeter. Now this is for Sunlu TPUs, not the TPU that I'm using. But you're going to put that here. Put in the diameter, which should be 1.75. Just for grins, I put the cost and the weight so that it'll give you that cost down here as well. In general, you can set your dollar value sign. I think it came by default with a different currency there. I don't recall, but now we've got it sliced. Obviously, you get here, you've got an island, and printing under there, it's going to want to probably put supports for that, for sure. Everything in Cura, everything in red is going to be supported. So you're going to want to put supports here and here, these flat spaces along the rim of the little cutout we made. I don't like messing with the supports right there, and that is one reason I like to print my my lures upside down. Another reason is depending on the infill you use, you're going to need to support the top a certain kind of way. Like, it's not really going to want, yeah, there you go. So you're not going to want to go here. If I had lightning infill or something, it would be really filling it up here. You would need a higher percentage infill than what I have here in order to get a clean top. So the method of which I build my lures is to make use of printing them upside down. So if it needs any supporting infill, it would be what is the bottom of the lure, which is on the top, but also I get cleaner areas here. I don't have to clean supports off. The areas that will be supported are going to all be along this whole surface, whole as in solid surface, and then I just cut it off with a knife or pull it off with pliers, and then do some sanding, which I would do anyway. So it saves a little bit of trouble there. There's no red, so there is no supports needed there. It's on top, so obviously there's no supports needed. It's going to show that it needs a little bit of support here, I don't support that. I don't support that one either. At least not normally. As we get further along, we'll get down to that layer and see if there's going to be any islands that are out there by themselves. We might have to make a little support that goes there, but it's not much, not a big deal to clean it off. If you'll notice here, if this was a cylinder, it would show red all the way down here, and it would want supports. Obviously, you can put a support blocker there, but you're printing something that the slicer is telling you needs supports to be a cleaner print. That's why I like to use these cubes or diamond shapes for the line ties and hook hangers. So if we go through our settings, I'm going to be printing this. Ignore what this says. I'm going to be printing this one at 0.1 millimeter layer height. You could pause it here if you wanted to look at this stuff. It's not anything special. Most of this other stuff is just how it was stock. Walls. More walls give you a stronger print. Most everywhere you read will tell you that, and that's true in my experience. 3 or 4. If I could do 4, I'd do 4. What I'm looking for is roughly around half of the density in grams. So when we solve for our density over here, and when it was a whole lure before we started making all the cuts in it, and that was 28 grams per cubic centimeter, which was an ounce. We did that intentionally, so it was a easy number to work with, easy number to remember. So I would be looking for something here around 14 grams. And we've got those other 2 pieces that we need to add in here, which I didn't save yet. So let's go ahead and open those and export them as well. Should be that guy, and it should be that guy. So let's hit those. Let's export. And let's open them up in Cura. You can hold down Control and open both of them at the same time. It's probably gonna make, it's probably gonna make one huge. It usually does, because I don't set the scale in Blender. You can, but I'm not always printing with the same units or the same scale, and sometimes I use Blender for other things. So I just leave it alone. Over here, it's gonna be 100,000. 100, 000. I have this to uniform scaling, so when I set that, it'll adjust the other ones as well. Right? Let's move it out of the way. And I'm gonna rotate it up like this. Now, you're gonna want to look on the bottom and make sure that it's sitting flat. Oh, I've got snap rotation on. Just move it a little bit until the whole thing is blue, just like that. And we're gonna do the same thing over here. Turn this dude a little bit. A little bit more. Perfect. Now, it's going to be a little top heavy, it looks like, going that way. And for the same reason that I turned the lure 90 degrees, I think I'm going to put snap rotation back on. I think I'm going to rotate this also 90 degrees that way, so that when the bed is going in and out, at least it's rocking back and forth in a direction that seems to be more stable. This one right here is fine. That one right there is missing something. So the cutout that we had for the ballast, we didn't put in either one. So we're missing something here. Let's jump back over here. Go through my see-through mode. Give me this. Let's add a Boolean modifier. Just gonna make a little cutout in the piece so that the split shot sits in there well. There we go. I thought we did that earlier, but maybe not. Obviously not. I'm not going to apply it. I'm just going to leave it like that. And I will do the same thing for the other dude. Just the joy of naming these. And it's easy to find them later. Okay, so let's export this one. Export the first one that we did. Just go back in here and update our models. Didn't do the aft, so maybe it'll only update one at a time. There we go. Apparently so. Okay, now you can see we've got those little cutouts in there for the ballast to sit in. Perfect. Those will need supports here. You could design those pieces so that that's at an angle, but I really want to just make this simple. For now, while we're running the slice, make sure that you don't have any supports on, and make sure that you don't have a brim or a raft or any other type of, what do they call it, bed adhesion. Yeah, build plate adhesion. Because we're trying to determine what is going to be the weight in grams of just the filament. And later on, when we're done, we will add the supports and we will add the brim. So again, I'm wanting to get to 14. It's a little heavy. I had added those 4 walls, so we're going to go back down to 3 walls. 3 is going to be fine. If it's a bigger lure, you're going to want to do 4. If it's a tiny, if you're making a little crankbait or something, something's like a ½ an inch long, maybe 1 inch long, you can go down on the wall count for sure. Okay, so we're sitting at 14 grams here. I think everything else on the wall is pretty normal. I'll leave it here if you want to look at it and compare it to yours. Top and bottom. Top and bottom isn't as important in what we're doing. You could go, sometimes I will fiddle with 2 or 3. 2 is going to be fine. What we will see is that if you look here, so the top and bottom is yellow. You're not really seeing any here, but as we go down, especially when we get all the way down, there's going to be some yellow there. If you've got it at 1 layer or 0 layers, you're going to have a hole there. Sometimes when it's at 2 layers, you might have little pinholes. And we might even have little pinholes on this one. But it's irrelevant because we're going to be sealing it and we're going to be giving it a top coat, and it's not going to be a problem. You do want to put a top coat on your lures. I'm sure that there's some way you could set it up so that it would be fairly watertight, but especially PETG, over time it's going to absorb water. Even with PLA, I don't know that PLA absorbs water, but you'll get some water creeping in through your different layers. So you want to seal it with something. I like to use UV resin. You could use a 2-part epoxy. So that's that. Sometimes I go to 3. Just use case. Infill right now, I have it at grid, and I have this set to 0. And what it gives me is, let's look from the top. So the line runs right down the middle, and then off of that I have some T's. So there's a little bit of horizontal support here, which is not really that, you don't need a lot. I mean, you don't need line. You can, but you don't need it. It's more than strong enough with something like this. The big thing to me is that I've got this line in the middle, and as it goes up, since we printed everything with 45-degree angles, it all starts on that. And it's a support for it, basically. So all of my line ties and my ballast pockets at their low point are resting on that, and it gives it a place to start. And that's why we like the 45-degree angles, because as you go up, you don't need that support on the outside. If yours, I think that this was default. So let's slice that and let's see what that looks like. Right. So this isn't a new setting. I don't know that it's new. I had recently clicked the box. I haven't tried printing this alone. Like that, see, that looks like it would take care of itself. And that's something worth looking at. Because look, 13 grams. The lower you can get it, the better in general. Like whenever you're prototyping a lure, the lower you can get the weight and filament, then the more buoyancy your lure is going to have, the more ballast it's going to need. But that means that you can choose where your ballast is going to go to help stabilize your lure. So these little lines going across here, this was extra infill lines to support skins. And I know that you've got this, that tells you a little bit about it, but I haven't played with it too much other than just turning it on. I've made some prints with it, but I haven't let it ride by itself. Like, if we had maybe had this to 0, well, what would that look like, I'm not going to mess with it right now, but that's something that I want to test later. So for now, I put this to 0, and it rotates the direction in which the lines go. And I've got it at 3. I try to get the minimum amount of infill. If you don't have this plugin for Cura, you should. If you have a question about what something is, you can go here and read about it. But it is annoying because it pops up when I'm trying to look at stuff. So you could do lightning infill, which I do. Lightning infill, not at 3%, it's not going to be good, but lightning infill can work, especially on smaller lures. I've made lures that with lightning infill that work just fine, and I've got fish on them, not a problem. It just depends on how I'm doing it, like what I'm trying to accomplish with that lure. I don't know that all slicers have lightning, so I went with grid, just trying to make this repeatable for everybody. I've got infill line multiplier set to 2, which just doubles the lines. It's just what it sounds like. Gives me a little bit more strength on the infill, and if I was trying to get a more precise number here, maybe I could make that 3 and see what that looks like. So let's close that one. I printed in PETG. I'm going to leave material alone because that's going to be dependent on what material you're printing in. It doesn't really have anything to do with the buoyancy necessarily of the lure, which is what I'm trying to talk about in today's video. Same with travel, same with cooling. We are going to use supports. I'll turn them on in a little bit. We are going to use build plate adhesion. I do print with a brim with PLA. If you are printing with PETG and you have something like this where we're looking at separate pieces, it's important to me to print them one at a time. And I have it to set print sequence manually, so it'll print the lure first, then it'll go over here and print this, and then it'll go over here and print this. And because of that, I've never had a problem with this, but just so that there's not a problem with it, I try to put them in order. Just so that the print head, if it starts here and then goes down here, when it travels over here, I don't want it to hit this. I'm pretty sure it moves up high enough to not have to worry about it. But I would rather just make it dummy proof and put it something like this. So it prints here first, and it prints there, and then it prints there. And let's get them a little bit closer together. Okay. Oh, one thing that I do have on walls that I think is important, but it's not by default, is alternate extra wall. I'll leave it on and show you. Every other layer, it adds an extra wall. So right now, really, I've got 3.5 walls on this guy. Let's get down close and we'll be able to see what it's talking about. So if I go, man, I got a bad habit of clicking that right button. If I go up one layer, you see how there's 1, 2, 3, there's 4 walls here. The infill stops at that wall. On my next layer, there's only going to be 1, 2, 3 walls, and the infill is going to go in here. So every other layer, it extends the infill in, and then it sandwiches it. And I feel like that adds a lot of strength to the support. I mean, to the structure. I have not tested one versus the other. Just my thought. It feels like making that kind of back and forth and weaving it together, I feel like it makes a difference. Now, if we reduce this down to, I want to try to get this down to 14.0. 2 is not the answer here. It just doesn't work with the way that I have the infill set up. But it is going to drop the weight down to 13. But as you can see, I prefer to have that one extra piece there. So I'll take it back to 3. I don't know. I wish there was a way to get fractions of a gram, decimal points, so I could see how many tenths of a gram, how far I am from 13 to 14, or from 14 to 15, I'm sorry. We may just go with what we got. Well, okay, if we turn this off, which I do want to have it, let's see what that does to our grams. It does bring it down. So let me go over with you. Once we add the, well, we need 28 grams to make our lure buoyant, or neutrally buoyant, basically. And I've got the gram scale here. We don't want the lure to be neutrally buoyant. We want to add about 10% to it. So to get a slow to almost medium sink, we want to add about 10%. So we've got 28 grams in order to make it neutrally buoyant. We're going to add 10%. So we need around 31 grams. And 2 hooks, ones I showed you in the video before. They're Eagle Claw number 4. And, the 2 split rings is 1.6 grams, and the 3 wire twist line ties adds another 1.5, so we're at 1.6 grams, and we're at 1.5 grams, and then the 4.5 pieces of number 3 split shot that we need, that we've designed into the lure, is 11.9, and the UV resin, one coating of it, adds about 2 grams on this size of lure. So we're at 17, and then if we add this 14 grams of filament here, we're sitting at 31, which is what we want. Again, I don't know if this is 14.0 or 14.5 or 14.9. The only way we can really get an idea is by bumping this up a little bit and seeing how long see how quickly we get up to 15 grams. I know that some people on YouTube recommend just add more filament, add more filament for ballast. Print some solid pieces of filament down on the bottom, or add a lot of infill so the lure weighs more. Okay, I think we're going to work with 3%. I think we're pretty close to 14.0. We're in the bottom half of the 14s for sure. But while people do recommend, increasing your infill so that you increase your weight in filament so that you don't have to add as much lead, that will work with some types of lures, but it gives you less stability of the lure. The more ballast that you can get down low, the more you can lower that center of gravity. And the lower you can get the center of gravity, and the higher you can get the center of buoyancy, and you get those two in a tug of war against each other, it keeps your lure in the floating position that you want it to be, and it'll be more stable whether you're reeling it in faster or it's got erratic action or whatever. The same idea with balsa wood, right? The density of balsa wood is like low, right? It's like half the weight of a hardwood. Balsa crankbaits have more erratic, lively action than a hardwood crankbait would. The same idea that we're going for, because balsa has a lower density, it's got more buoyancy, it needs more weight. If you put weight up here, there are times if you were making a lipless crankbait, you want the weight up here, and we'll go over that in another video. But for what we're making here, for swim baits, for glide baits, usually for crankbaits, for jerk baits, you're going to be best starting with that weight as low as you can get it. And then there are going to be use case scenarios where having the weight higher up is going to do something for you, but really that's like more complicated than today's video can get into. So there we go. I think we're set here with how we would want to print it. I'm going to print it. And I've got these two pieces, right? It's possible that when you print them, get out of here. When you print them, they may not fit. They may be just a hair too wide. This way and this way, I mean, where they don't, maybe it's too snug of a fit. It's like extremely an interference fit. If that's the case, it'll only take you like 20 minutes to print these guys again. That's why I like to do it this way, because if these don't fit, then I just got to print that little piece, or maybe just that little piece. Or you could try to shave a little bit off with a razor blade. But if you wanted to print them again so that you can get something repeatable, the way you would do it is, I'm going to use this one for an example. I'll select my piece. I'm going to hit the / to zoom in and focus on that. I'm going to add a cube. And let's bring the size of it down. Something that we can see and we can work with, right? And bring it down here. You wascally web it. Me and that right click, man, I tell you. Okay. What is the rotation we have of this? Again, 32.533. We could have copied and pasted that. I could have also just gone here, as we've shown before. rotate that way, and select this cube, lock it on there. I'm going to move it, and what is that, the z-axis, the local z-axis. I just want to get it right up against that edge there. We're going to duplicate it, and we're going to move it along its local x up to here, and we're just going to stick it on that other edge too. I apologize if you can hear my dog breathing over there. What happened here? It didn't snap to that corner. Now we're good. Okay, so if this piece was a little bit too big and it didn't fit, you'll want to move these in. So I'm going to go G on the x-axis. What way is that? Is that negative? Yep. Small increment. Like 5 thousandths, right? 0.005 inches. Same thing here. G, X, X. So that we're on the local x-axis. We're going to go 5 thousandths, 0.005 inches. And then we're going to use those cubes to shave off those ends. So go in here just as we've done several times before. Add you two Boolean modifiers. Make sure they're on difference. And hit that one. And hit that one. And it'll cut that corner off there. And then re-export this. Come back to Cura, hit reload on your model, and you'll now have one that's just a little bit smaller. You could shrink it, right? Or you could shrink it through here. Or you could just click here and hit S to scale. I say shrink it, I mean scale it. But the problem is, it's going to be changing all these other parameters too, and really, we want the general shape of it to stay the same. You know, we want it to keep that contour line. We want it to keep the contour line here. Oh, look at that. I'm glad we didn't cut it. We would need to make these guys wider. So pay attention to that when you do yours. Don't use 0.2 inches on that y-axis. You're going to want them bigger. They don't have to be perfect size. They just need to be bigger, so that when it cuts through there, it cuts the whole length of it, and not just that little corner piece. So that's what you're going to do if it doesn't fit well. If it needs to just be a hair smaller. And you can fine tune that, and that way you can save it for later. We print this lure a bunch of times, right? Okay, so for supports, I'm printing with PETG. I use a raft. I recommend that you use a raft even with PLA, because I'm sorry, not a raft, a brim. I recommend that you print with a brim, because you've got so little down here. Right? Give it those first couple layers something to really stick to. This needs a brim, this needs a brim, this needs a brim. So we're going to do brim. I don't remember why. These are just settings I've used for a couple of years. You may use a different brim, and that's fine. I'm not saying that these are right, but this is what I've always used. Those work for me. Supports, I use tree supports. I still haven't got supports really dialed in with PETG, but I mean, they support. It does a good job of supporting. What it doesn't do a good job of is coming off. Man, my computer's going slow today. I'm gonna go ahead and save this and close Blender. Maybe that'll help. If anybody has a computer they want to donate to me, I'm open. Okay, so now we're gonna add our supports. We, again, do not add your supports and your brim at the beginning of the process, because your grams, your weight of your filament is going to be extremely inflated, because we were sitting at 14 earlier, and now let's see what we're looking at. Yeah, I wanted to look at that and see if that really needed to be supported. So see this 3 extra grams of filament. So now we'll see our brim and we'll see our tree supports. Okay, it did not print supports over there underneath those eyes, which I'm happy about. It did print supports here. When I've got using my tree supports and my PETG, these flat surfaces, they come off just fine for me. Where I have problems is on these curved surfaces. Let me show you what I use here. If anybody has recommendations on how to make this better, I'm open to hearing it. So on flat surfaces, this works really good for me. It's like zigzag floor and ceiling something, right? But on the curved surfaces, it doesn't really work like that. I get this, and as I come down, especially down there at the bottom, see, I'm printing on the bed, right? So that doesn't work. I don't print it that way. Let me just show you. As it goes up, even here, I'm not really getting the right kind of zigzag support. I don't know what I need to do different so that it'll separate well. That fuses very strongly there. You can pull it off with pliers. It leaves some scars. You got to clean it up with sandpaper. I don't mind. It's a little bit of work, but I mean, it's not a couple minutes. It's just a couple minutes worth of work. Not a big deal. But what I do when I print these upside down, I raise this guy up, 5 millimeters or whatever. Something like that. So it's printing off of the ground. It's printing more filament. It's wasting filament, some may say. But it gives me a better finish on the top, even with the support scars. When I print it on the bed, sometimes it gets a flat spot right here, or it really sticks to the support, and I've had it create some holes when I pull the supports off, but not that big of a deal. Everything can be fixed. So when you raise it up like that, it gives you supports all the way to the lowest point. Kind of like printing on a resin printer, like well, if you have a resin printer, you're familiar with resin printing, you know what I'm talking about. But as we go down, see, now I'm landing on that, and it works better. It just doesn't work as good as I would dream that it did. So if you are in Cura and you have a lot of success printing supports with PETG, I am open to hearing some input. All right, we're gonna print it, and in 5 hours we'll see what we have.